Gojira, more commonly known as Godzilla, has captured our imagination since 1954. With 28 films coming from Toho, 2 American films, 4 TV shows, comics, games, an animated film, and an American franchise on the horizon, there's no question why we call him the King of the Monsters. Today, I will review and discuss the latest installment, Shin Godzilla, 2016. Welcome back, everyone. It's me, Zimzella, and as promised, today I will discuss and review Shin Godzilla. And man, all I have to say is that I think Shin Godzilla, it's not my favorite Godzilla movie by any means. That still goes to Godzilla 2000 as being my favorite Godzilla movie, but I think by far this is probably one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. And I don't think it's better than 54. I think 54 will always stand above as the best Godzilla movie, not because it was the first, but just the impact it had then in being the franchise spawner. I think does add a little weight to it, but overall, this film tackles so many different topics that a lot of people really don't seem to understand or look at. I saw this movie last week, Tuesday, during the week that it was being released, and I was blown away by the topics that it discussed, and I think from my own knowledge and education, I think helped me understand this movie a little bit better. But let me just get a few things out of the way. First off, when I started looking at people who had reviews on some of the groups I was in, a lot of them are like, oh, this is the worst Godzilla movie ever. And then they would list these reasons, and I think these two little memes right here kind of like detail and describe what I was thinking when I saw those reviews. And yeah, as you can see, well, there's 4 really main complaints that come down to these reviews, and it's politics, too much politics, lack of military intervention, Godzilla's design, as well as terrible effects. Now, starting off with politics, this is one thing I've said a lot if you've or not really watched, but see me on forums or in message boards, and it's that you won't get some of these topics if you're American. And I'm not saying that to be racist or call it on these people, oh, you're just dumb Americans, you know what you're talking about. I mean, I'm American myself, but I think that a lot of people who are American wouldn't understand it, but a lot of Japanese people would. With these politics, Japan has a bureaucracy. Like, that's how Japanese government goes. There is procedures to everything. Like, everything is strict. There is a process, and you need to follow that process because that's just how Japan is. Japan's very nationalistic, and they follow a strict code of respect and honor. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, wow, they're just trying to pad everything with politics. Well, no, like, that the politics actually seems quite realistic to me. If it was a country, especially Japan, was had to encounter a giant monster, there would be so many questions. Like, it's like, well, this thing's in the water. How is it going to get to land? Will it crush itself under its own weight? These were all topics that were discussed in the film. And at the start of the film, when we see the blood from Godzilla in the ocean, as well as some of it seeping into a tunnel, their first priority was damage control, then saying like, oh, there's these rumors. However, no one really addresses these rumors because they're like, oh, no, that's not something we need to take seriously. And it's like, should we meet about this? Should we meet about that? Who should we bring in? And there's just all these questions, and really they're not getting anything done. And this will come around in a topic later on, and then discuss when I'm talking about Godzilla's symbols and characterization. But to anyone who really doesn't know much about Japanese government, yeah, that's kind of how Japan's government works. There is a lot of meetings and processing and strict codes you need to follow by and just need to go with. Also, a lack of military intervention. Despite we seeing the Japanese self-defense force very prominent in the older films, a lot of people need to take into account the fact that realistically, Japan really doesn't fight anymore. After World War II, all the World War II pacts, America pretty much does all the fighting for Japan. Like, Japan doesn't really have a standing army besides the SDF, and they're not people who are going to go in there with all these strategies and plans for war, because that's not what they do anymore. After World War II, that's just something that Japan threw to the wayside. And people are like, oh, why did they do it here or kill things there? It's like, again, the politics that are involved in decisions for Japanese self-defense, as well as something like a war of all things in this time period, it's very complicated, and a lot of people don't seem to understand that. And I think it's kind of sad where it's like people say that's a bad thing. No, that's a really good thing. That's a really realistic thing. Like, that really does show what Japanese culture is like. And I mean, like, I don't understand why people think that's a bad thing, where it's like they're really, really trying to go for a real vibe with this government and these people. And I will have to say that I think I always love the military marches and the tanks always just sort of sitting there in that one spot shooting at the monsters. But I really liked a lot of the shots during Godzilla's fourth form when he's coming across to Tokyo, and there's tanks on beside this river as well as near these bridges, and they just start firing him, and they're moving in different directions. They're changing angles to fire on him and get better angles, and you see them where there's what we call it, cameras mounted on the tanks, and you see them rolling around like you saw that in the trailer. Like, those angles along with the music, which to anyone who's a fan of Evangelion, decisive battle played during Godzilla's third form during the square off with the Apache helicopters, that really got my blood flowing. Although there's no real action in that scene, that was really, like, I thought that was a really cool scene. But yeah, I mean, the politics and the military actions were very realistic and deliberate and characteristic of Japan during not just after World War II, but in general after World War II. Moving on to another thing is that people complain about Godzilla's design, specifically the third and second forms, which would be the second form being the eel form, the third form being the turkey form, as people call it, and some people have complaints about the fourth form. The second form looks like a sea monster. I think a lot of people who are complaining don't take into account the fact that Godzilla in 54 did not have a design until after the script was finished. And then they used different dinosaurs to create Godzilla. However, looking at this Godzilla, if this was like they were trying to remake Godzilla as a sea monster, he looks like a sea monster. He looks similar to an eel with probably very dinosaur-like legs. However, the eyes really gave you that uncanny valley look, as they do not focus on anything. And one scene where we do not see the first form completely, but it's shrouded by boats that it's pushing along as it's sort of trudging along the ground, you just see its big eye there, and it felt so reminiscent to seeing footage of giant squids, as well as renditions of giant squids looking at things. Like, it really just had that giant sea monster feel to it. And I think the second form had that transition where it looked like a mutation, like Godzilla really looked irradiated and mutated, like he looked really fleshy and stuff, although he doesn't look scarred like the final form, but he just has this raw look to him, and he doesn't look sea monsterish anymore. He looks really weird, like it's really hard to describe him in that form. And in the fourth form, like, let me just put this little thing right here, and this little meme right here. People are complaining about this Godzilla design, but I think really if Godzilla 54, if 54 was made now, that's Godzilla, Shin Godzilla is what 54 would have looked like. Like, if anything, he has more in common with what keloid scar victims, which are the victims, and well, the scarring that victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had from the bombs. He looks more like a bomb victim, more than even 54 did, and more than any Godzilla did. Like any of the Showa Godzillas, the Millennium or Heisei Godzillas, he looks more like he's paying homage to Godzilla's roots, like what Godzilla is supposed to be, more than most of the newer and older Godzillas besides 54. And I think I don't get why a lot of people just overlook that either. It's like, oh, this design's bad. It's got tiny arms. I mean, he looks mutated. Like, you think a mutation's gonna look perfect? He really looks like it doesn't look natural. And again, Uncanny Valley, he really looks Uncanny Valley. Like his eyes don't focus on anything even in the final form, as they just sit there looking down, similar to 54. The tail's just swinging around, and it's got all those fleshy parts and those bony parts near the end of the tail, which also look kind of disgusting as well. And he just has this, again, Resident Evil zombie-esque appearance. And I give props to the design. In terms of comparisons to other characters, Hideki Anno, the director of the film, has done, it doesn't really fall in line with any of his designs of the angels in Evangelion. And I will be talking about Evangelion a lot, as I think there's a few things that this movie takes from Evangelion. But I think the angels had more, really, they had organic designs, but they didn't have like this kind of look to them where they had all this detail as well as scarring on them. They looked very clean and stuff, but again, that was an anime, so you can't really tell live action anime. But Shin Godzilla overall doesn't really follow an angel design, but it really does follow what 54 and Godzilla's roots should be. Lastly, now this one is that this kind of makes me kind of go this, because people complain about the CGI being bad, and to all you people who don't do any research and just complain about something, a typical Japanese movie budget is $3 million. A typical Hollywood budget, $65 million to $100 million. Yeah, that's a really big difference. And even then, some Hollywood movies have really bad CGI with that big a budget. And in this movie, there are some scenes where I will admit, I could not tell the difference between it being an actual suit or CGI. I know it was motion captured now, and that would be a correction to one of my older analysis videos on Shin Godzilla. But again, I will say that for a $3 million budget, that's okay CGI. And I think comparing it to movies with way larger budgets to be unfair, in my opinion. And now I just want to go over like just a little brief analysis of the film. Like, pretty much start again, first form Godzilla appears, Japanese government has a lot of meetings, they don't know what to do, Godzilla transforms in second form, they do not kill it, the Godzilla escapes, they talk a little bit about Godzilla, a new character appears, talks a little bit more about Godzilla, Godzilla fourth form appears, Godzilla rampages through Tokyo, and Godzilla unleashes atomic breath, Godzilla destruction, goes into a hibernation, humans start developing plan to defeat Godzilla, put plan to action, it works, and then that's the end of the film. That's just a brief overview. Now, I want to go into Godzilla's powers. A lot of people are complaining about Godzilla's powers. Like, everyone's saying, oh, they're too outlandish, and they're too this, they're too that. I mean, I thought they were really cool. I love the atomic volley, as I am coining the term. Like, the beam from his back, that's what I call it, the atomic volley. The tail beam was kind of crazy. Like, some of the scenes where the tail's whirling around, the beam's just flying everywhere, hitting drones near the end of the film. As well as, obviously, the atomic breath buildup, when he opens his mouth, spreads it open, and it just has that gnarly look in the center between the two jaw pieces, and you just see the smoke turn into fire, and then concentrate into a beam. To a Japanese person, seeing that fire before it turned into that purple beam looks so reminiscent of carpet bombing, or fire bombing is a more correct term, but fire bombing. And again, Godzilla attacked Tokyo in this film, and Tokyo during World War II got firebombed a lot, and there was more civilian casualties from firebombings in Tokyo than there was in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That you could look up for yourself as well. And I think to a Japanese person, seeing that happen and just seeing like 3 wards of Tokyo get destroyed in this film, just seeing that imagery of a creature performing pretty much what happened during World War II in a single instant, I feel would be so powerful to the Japanese people who would be watching this film when it came out the first time, when it first was released. And a lot of people in America would be like, oh yeah, go Atomic Breath and stuff. But I mean, like, movies were always about making people feel something. And I think that scene, especially afterwards, when you see Godzilla just walking with his eyes illuminating purple, as well as the fleshy parts illuminating purple, with hellfire in the back, just really cemented Godzilla's power, as well as what symbol he was, which now I'll get into. He is a symbol for a lot of things. Obviously, he's a symbol for firebombing, as shown by his powers. He's an atomic power symbol, obviously displayed by every Godzilla since 54. He's a symbol for the tsunamis that hit Tokyo, the earthquakes that attacked Tokyo. Or not attacked, but that hit Tokyo. The nuclear meltdowns that almost happened, like Reactor 1 in Fukushima. Like, really, this Godzilla, at its core, is anti-humanitarian. Even his origins, during the film, they state that there was a bunch of nuclear dumping in Tokyo Bay, and because of that, these microscopic organisms were feeding off of this, and because of that, they became irradiated, and then became this mutated amalgamation, and that's what Godzilla is, a mutated amalgamation of both mistakes of man, from both just wasting as well as just not taking care of things, and just nuclear power in general, which I think he takes the analogy that 54 had of being a symbol of the atomic bomb and taking it way further, because at the end of the film, when Godzilla is frozen, the main character Yaguchi says, we have to live with him. And that's something that's very prominent in Japan, as nuclear power is very prominent in Japan, and it's not exactly safe, as you have to worry about radiation, meltdowns, all that stuff. But unlike in 54, where they kind of diffused the situation of Godzilla with just stopping him entirely with the oxygen destroyer, they froze him, and at this point in Shin Godzilla, they don't know whether or not Godzilla would start moving again. So I think that even then with 54, it was more like oh, we did this, it's done, we're good, but remember this lesson. It's more of we froze it, we stopped this. We don't know if we actually stopped this truly or not, but we're going to have to live with this now. And I just felt that was so powerful. And the start of the film with the first form of Godzilla we see is so reminiscent of seeing the tsunamis that hit Japan, as well as the devastation he caused is like the March 11th earthquake in 2011, where there was like 15,000 dead, and there was 2,000 I think plus missing. And during that time, the Japanese government was still like trying to do all these things. Like, their responders were responding after all this had happened, and Japan was just in a state of disarray. Like, a lot of places that were around those areas, all the food and stuff, all those supplies were being shipped off to those areas to help those people. And thinking about it then, if something in real life was happening like this, with Godzilla attacking a section of Tokyo, those 3 wards, and then Godzilla being frozen, just imagine. Japan's a really small country. However, geographically, it's a power because of economics and stuff with Tokyo. But being the economic center, they talk about all the shares and stuff, and a lot of interest in investors being less interested in Japan because of Godzilla in the film. And I think that's so important, because that really just showed the realism, like, hey, this is not just affecting the people, but it's affecting, like, the world. Like, a lot of places depend on Japan, and Japan depends on a lot of places. And if there's a giant monster running around in Japan, then that could collapse their economy, not to mention their population, which I'll just get into now. Here's a population pyramid of Japan right now, and as you can see, like, they have a very low birth rate, very low death rate, which is good and all, but if Godzilla was to attack Japan, in Tokyo specifically, and Japan has a pretty high urban percentage, if he destroyed 3 wards and those people weren't evacuated, not only would that kill a good portion of not just independence, but also dependence, that would increase mortality rates. And it would also be the fact that this Godzilla is shown to be radioactive, and being close to him in vicinity will cause you to get radiation sickness, and unsure of the half-life before at the end of the film, there would be such low birth rates in the country, especially in that area of Japan, and their net migration would probably plummet. Like, who wants to go to a country where a giant monster just randomly showed out of the ocean and started attacking their city? Like, the fact is that Godzilla's presence and what he did, specifically in Tokyo, is so much larger than people give it credit for. Like, people are like, oh, Godzilla destroyed that. Oh, okay. I mean, no. Like, literally, Godzilla, in a way, if you look at it in the epidemiological transition model, he's part of, like, the degenerative and man-made disease part of transitions, because he, again, like I said, would cause higher mortality rates, and the radiation he emit would lower birth rates, because no one would really want to be in an area with all that radiation. People wouldn't be able to live there, and that would also decrease Japan's net migration. Like everything I just said, Godzilla, kaiju in general, would destroy a country in its population. Like, that's why I think if there's going to be another Godzilla movie that's a sequel or continues in the same universe as Shin Godzilla, but I want them to explore this concept of the economy as well as kaiju and how they affect the world geographically. Like, kaiju are pushing people out of countries and pulling them towards other countries, causing crises both economically and population-wise. And that's just so interesting. Like, thinking about it, we all want to see the monster, but I really felt for the characters. Like, there's one line I remember where they were talking about bombing Godzilla, and there was this one Japanese person where he said that America's asked us for a lot of things, a lot of outrageous things, but he, like, tears up and he says, but this is just too far. Like, this guy does not want to see Japan get hit by another bomb, as the Americans want to nuke Godzilla and they think a nuclear bomb's gonna kill a atomic monster. But I mean, like, that, it just made me really feel for these characters, and I just am blown away by how many people miss these little nods. And I think it just comes down to the fact that, hey, this isn't your culture, you aren't gonna understand this as much as they will. But I think if people really looked into it, or if people see this video, they'll maybe understand it a little bit better. So, I mean, like, that's just kind of it, really. I just gave a little short analysis of the film, but I really just wanted to talk about Godzilla in general, as well as more of the concepts of the film in general. So, more of a discussion than a review. But, yeah, that's it. I really hope a lot of people see this video and kind of look more into not just Godzilla's characterization, but also the effect he has on Japan in this film, because I really think it's more powerful than any Godzilla film in a long while. And I mean, like, if you don't want to think when you watch a movie, that's fine. If anything, go watch the 2014 movie and keep up with that franchise. But to me, I think this is by far one of the best Godzilla films in recent years. It's not my favorite, but it's by far the best. That's all, guys. See ya.